Hello, everyone. It's great to have you here with us today. My name is Brian Bennett. I'm part of the Alumni Relations team here at Trinity Development and Alumni, and I'm delighted you're joining us for this latest episode in our Inspiring Ideas at Trinity series. Today, we'll be discussing From Front Square to the Olympics with our MC, Susan Ahern, interviewing John Tangwe and Jack Kelly. Before introducing our speakers, a few things to note. This webinar will last just under an hour. There'll be a panel discussion, after which we'll open the floor to audience questions. You can submit your question, simply use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We encourage as much audience interaction as possible. You're welcome to pop questions in throughout the webinar as you think of them. I'd also like to note that we are using Zoom-generated automatic subtitles for this webinar. If you'd like to turn these subtitles on or off, click the CC Closed Captions button at the bottom of your screen, then click Show or Hide Subtitles. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for later viewing on our Trinity Alumni YouTube channel. And now I'd like to introduce you to our speakers. Susan Ahern is a practicing barrister, mediator, and international arbitrator. She is the past chair of Sports Law Bar Association of Ireland and is an arbitrator of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. In that capacity, she was appointed to the CAS Anti-Doping Division for the Tokyo Olympic Games 2020. Susan has over 25 years experience in commercial and sports law practice. She was formerly head of legal and legislative affairs of World Rugby, where she delivered 4 Rugby World Cup tournaments and also established the World Rugby Integrity Unit. She is the first independent judicial chair of World Wheelchair Rugby. Susan is also an experienced independent non-executive director, and today sits on a number of corporate boards, including RTE and the host organizer for the 2023 Cycling World Championships Limited. Susan was one of the recipients of the Trinity Alumni Awards 2022. John Tangwe is a former competitive rower for the United States of America. He received his master's in operations and supply chain management from Trinity Business School in 2021. He rowed for Dublin University Boat Club while training for the Tokyo 2020 Paralympics, where he competed for the United States and won a silver medal in the PR3 4+ boat classification. He currently resides and works in New York City. And finally, Jack Kelly. Jack played rugby at St. Michael's College before studying law at Trinity and playing for Dublin University Football Club from 2016. He joined the Leinster Academy in 2017 until 2019, where he was first selected for the Irish Sevens team, subsequently making his debut at Twickenham in 2019. Jack went to the Tokyo 2020 Olympics as part of the first Irish rugby team to ever qualify for the Olympics. Recently, he has played his 100th game for the Irish Sevens and is currently part of the team pushing to qualify for Paris 2024. Alongside all this, he is completing his training contract to become a solicitor with McCann Fitzgerald. I'll hand you over to Susan now, and I hope you enjoy the conversation.
Brian, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. It really is a privilege to be here today speaking to 2 exceptional athletes who have carved their sporting journeys into the annals of history and still going in some cases. Trinity, as some of you may well be aware, has been represented in the Olympic Games since 1908, when 10 athletes competed across 4 sports. And Trinity students have represented Trinity through the Olympic Games in the 1920s, in the late 1940s, and then every decade since. And of course, since the introduction of the Paralympics in 1960 in Rome. It's also had the privilege of having 3 triple Olympians across the sports of athletics, modern pentathlon, and rowing. So there's certainly a theme there in terms of some of those sports. John Tangwe and Jack Kelly are amongst the most recent baton carriers for Trinity. So that pathway from picking up the first rugby ball or getting into that first boat to ultimately competing in the 2020 Olympic and Paralympic Games in Tokyo really is quite the journey. And no doubt a journey with lots of ups and downs, challenges and triumphs along the way. And so I'm really looking forward to speaking to Jack and John about their experiences on that journey, about the people who helped them, and especially those who inspired them along the way. So John, let me start with you. Tell me a little bit about your background and where your interest in sport came from.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. So I grew up in New Jersey, not far from New York City, and my dad was a really competitive basketball player when he was my age and before my time. So I grew up in sort of a basketball household, but due to my disability, having club feet, I couldn't actively compete in that past a reasonable age, say about middle school age. And at that time, I was also playing baseball, lacrosse, doing all types of activities. And then, sure enough, one summer, my mom sort of gave me an ultimatum. I wasn't doing anything over the summer. I was just staying at home. She said, you can either get a job or go to this rowing camp. So I sure as heck went to the rowing camp, avoided working. And it was a perfect fit because with my disability, I was sitting the whole time. It was the running that was the issue with the other sports. So I found the most competitive, laziest sport I could, avoiding running at all costs. So.
And so what was it like that first time you sat in a rowing boat? Like, did it feel like home straight away?
No, it is an incredibly unnatural movement and feeling being in a boat of that size. It's terrifying. You feel like you're gonna flip over in the water, and for some reason you just keep coming back and keep going. And it took a long time to actually get used to the boat. And yeah, I would say I still haven't felt comfortable in the boat just yet. Still feels a little off, but.
Gosh, imagine what you do when you do feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And what about you, Jack? What tell us a little bit about your background and where your interest in sport generally came from, and obviously for rugby.
Yeah, so I grew up in Dublin, and similarly enough, like a kind of a big sporting family. My dad and his uncles would have all played rugby all the way up through college, and I suppose it was always on the TV. And I've got two younger brothers, and we kind of ended up just making games out of anything. So we were always playing something. And then I think around the age of 5, my dad brought me down to Old Belvedere Rugby Club, and just loved it. Would play kind of any sports, but it was sort of the rugby that really that I kind of really took to, and sort of I just played from then all the way up.
And a lot of kids go to rugby or hockey or whatever the sport might be, and they don't stick at it. What was it that really made you stick at the sport? Was there any particular coach or influential person that helped you on that pathway?
Yeah, well, I think it was probably the fact that my dad was my coach at a very young age. I think he was very enthusiastic, and when you're only 5, 6, or 7, it's kind of whichever dad show up on the day is who ends up taking the coaching sessions. So I'd say he would definitely claim that he instilled some very early on skills in me. And then when I went to secondary school in St. Michael's College, St. Michael's was kind of quite a competitive rugby school, and there were definitely coaches and characters around the school that would have kind of instilled like quite a sort of professional mindset in a lot of the kids that they might see have a bit of talent. So Andy Skean, who was a teacher and a coach in school, he kind of would take a couple of guys aside and say, look, if you actually dedicate yourself, I could see you really going somewhere with this. So I think he definitely has had an impact in me, kind of moving from just enjoying playing rugby to maybe thinking about actually pursuing and seeing where I can go with it.
So the environment was as important as the people. In fact, the people, it sounds to me, populated the environments that you were in. Is that a fair to say? Yeah,
I think so. I mean, if you play in somewhere like St. Michael's or Trinity, you'll see the players that play 2-3 years ahead of you move on and kind of really excel. Like I would have, when I was coming through school, I would have played with James Ryan, who just captain Leinster in in Heineken Cup final, and Max Deegan and Ronan Kelleher was one of my friends growing up. So it was quite a rugby environment, and you could it felt real because you could see people that move on and really succeed. So I think that's where kids in the school really got that belief.
Yeah. And what about you, John? You obviously went to that first camp. How did you develop out of that camp and into, what was the pathway? Did you then become a member of a club? What was your pathway out of that first influential camp?
Yeah, so I was also very lucky with sort of my location and who I was surrounded by, because where the lake is located, it's right near Princeton, New Jersey, which at that time, and I think it still is, was the training center for the US men's and women's Olympic team. And so they would coach at my club in the sort of off time to make some cash on the side. So I actually learned to row from this woman, Emily Regan, who was like a 2-time Olympian. So I was taught by Olympians how to row, which at the time didn't really register with me. I was just still like a little fat kid, not really knowing what was going on. And so, yeah, and then I joined the club and rowed there for 4 years, continuously being coached by, rowers who competed at the highest level you possibly could in the sport. And then I went out to college, and sort of the rest was history there.
So again, an environmental theme there. And what about, and I mean, Olympic rowers, to have that influence is absolutely phenomenal. I'm actually quite interested in the team environment that both rugby and that rowing crews have. John, maybe you can just take us through what that team environment meant to you. Was that part of the attraction for staying in the sport, or were there other aspects to it that really, I suppose, were a benefit to you? Definitely.
I think the rowing culture is definitely, the idea is you suffer together, and then that's sort of how you make the strongest bond you can. I made some of my best friends, and still have my best friends, all through the sport. And I think that camaraderie and sort of that stereotypical sort of, picture of a rowing boat on a poster that says teamwork. That's very true, albeit corny, but still very true, because you spend so much time. I'm sure rugby is the same. You spend so much time together, doing the same things over and over again, and sort of through that, struggle, you grow incredibly close with your coaches, your peers. It's pretty special.
Yeah, I played volleyball, and I certainly, you talk about camaraderie, and for me it was the sisterhood as well, where you are doing everything together, and that was much more preferable to sort of the indoor or the individual pursuit of athletes. And Jack, would you agree with John there? What did it mean to you to be part of a team?
I think the team aspect of rugby is really like the main thing that pulls people to play. Like playing all through school and through college, it was just, that's where you made your best friends. That's where in college, you'd finish up playing on a Saturday, and then both teams would just pile into the PAV and have a couple of drinks, and you'd even interacting with the coaches and all that kind of stuff. It was definitely a very special environment. Growing up and going to college, and I still, we would link up as former teams in Trinity, and link up with Tony Smeeth and Hugh Maguire, the coaches, to kind of just check in and keep in touch and stuff. And then when it came to playing sevens, definitely the kind of suffering through adversity together is a big component. We play like 2-day weekends where you play 3 games on the first day and 3 games on the second day. So any bumps and bruises that you pick up on the first day, you then play with on the second day. So it's kind of, you almost feel a bit mad waking up, early on a Sunday morning and looking around the circle and just seeing everyone tired and battered and bruised. But you kind of just, you end up getting to a state where you're all just laughing at each other, thinking this is a bit mental, but and you kind of just suffer through it, and you form really close bonds as a result, I think.
And John, do you find the same? I mean, what I think I'd be interested to hear, what would your teammates say about you? Because I always think that teammates, they know you so well, having spent so much time training together, being together, going on tour together, that they are capable of knowing about you and saying things about you to your face that are that even a family member might not. So what would your teammates say about you?
Gosh, I don't know if I want to know, but hopefully trustworthy. Because again, going back to, I think, the aspect of rowing where you're all in the same shell together, all having to do the same thing. I was a stroke seat in Tokyo for the first time I've ever stroked. So the person setting the rhythm, leading the race, which was really scary, but sort of my teammates wanted me to sort of be in that position. So I think in that case, maybe they wouldn't necessarily say it, but I guess that choice sort of speaks for itself, that they trusted me. And that's just and I imagine the same with the rugby, trust being sort of the most important part of a team, and supporting each other, and sort of knowing that you're giving your best and so is everyone else. And then you control what you control, and then hope for the best.
Yeah, that stroke seat is it's a leadership position, isn't it? I mean, in effect, that is, you are taking control of everything that your teammates are doing.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So Jack, you came straight from the Leinster Academy, or from school into Leinster Academy, and also Trinity. That sounds to me like a very intense time. Can you tell me why you chose to study at Trinity?
I'm not sure if there was any one specific reason, but I just my mum went to Trinity. She loved it. I live close enough to town, so when I was younger, I would have kind of passed through Trinity, and I think the grounds are a very special part of Trinity. I think they just really give a great college experience, because people don't want to go home. They don't want to go home after lectures. They'd rather kind of hang around and, sit out in the pav or on the cricket pitch. So I sort of saw that. Obviously, it has a great reputation as being a really good university. So, sort of those different reasons. But I think one of the main ones was just that I feel like I would really enjoy myself there.
And you, John, obviously you're not a Dubliner. You've come across a very big pond to come to Trinity. Why did you choose Trinity as the location for you to study for your master's? Yeah,
for me, it ticked basically all the boxes I wanted to do, which was they had exactly the program I wanted. Wanted to study supply chain at an international university, because growing up, I never had really an international experience at all. And they had a great rowing team. So those were the three boxes that ticked it for me. And so I applied and got in before COVID, and then sort of that all happened. And at that time, Trinity was still bringing everyone in. So I came and yeah, so that's how I sort of ended up at the school.
Yeah. And of course, you were a recipient of a Trinity Sports Scholarship as well. So just talk us through a little bit of what it was like juggling the study, the elite sport. What kind of, I suppose, accommodations were made for you as an elite athlete who was trying to do so much in obviously in very difficult circumstances as well? How did you manage?
It was sort of business as usual for me. My undergraduate school, I did the competitive rowing and managing the schoolwork, my undergraduate. So for me, it was pretty natural. I know that doesn't necessarily answer your question, but it just sort of, it always clicked for me, being able to sort of exert myself in rowing and sort of clear my mind. And that sort of opened up the opportunity to really then focus on my schoolwork. For me, it was always the best balance. And Trinity, of course, supported me immensely, although we never had sort of in-person classes. So I actually never had to technically go to campus because I was living in Chapel Izard at the time near the boathouse.
Yeah.
So that actually was very convenient for me to be able to do my online classes and then go straight to the boathouse in under 15 minutes. So for me, that balance, that's sort of what balanced it for me.
Yeah, and it's a lovely part of the city as well. So lots of greenery out there at the Phoenix Park and the river and everything. So yeah, logistics actually became an important part of your day. And what about you, Jack? You obviously had the 4-year experience. How were you able to manage your rugby with your training, your travel, and your studies? How were you able to make that mix work?
I definitely think that starting out, it probably took me a little while to maybe figure it out personally on how I kind of allocate time to different things and stuff like that. But to be fair to the Leinster Academy, they do understand that the vast majority of their players in there are studying for something or have something else going on outside of rugby. So it's just knowing that they have an understanding. And then on the side for Trinity, kind of getting in contact with my lecturers early so that I don't kind of just spring something on them. Sorry, I can't go to this, or I haven't done that, and kind of working out a plan with them so that the lecturers will be happy, that I'd be happy. And I think that's kind of where the sports scholarship came in, really, was that it gave I didn't feel as guilty just making these asks. I'd make all these asks and then attach a letter from the sports and say, look, I'm not actually just coming out of the blue with you. I'm not a spoofer,
Yeah.
So that definitely helped.
Yeah, those accommodations, it's certainly a wonderful part of the scholarship program that it is. It's also about the time and engagement with the lecturers and so on. It makes it so much easier. But listen, Jack, talk to me now about when the possibility of going to an Olympic Games came up. Talk us through, A, how it was possible, and B, the qualification process, and how long it was.
Yeah, so look, we definitely didn't make it easy on ourselves how we qualified for the Olympics. To give some context, we play on the World Series, and the 4 top teams of the World Series the year prior to the Olympics, they automatically qualify. After that, you go into your regional qualification. So we would qualify through Europe, and that consists of a once-off tournament where the winner qualifies. We had that qualification opportunity in Toulouse the year before Tokyo, and we didn't win. Great Britain got in ahead of us, which was sort of very disappointing, but we did manage to come third, and the second and third teams in each regional qualification go into a final repechage, which happened 3 weeks before Tokyo. So we went all through we went through the year leading up to, and then an extended year because of COVID, of basically preparing for this one qualification tournament in Monaco, which was 3 weeks before the Olympics. So it was definitely a very long and drawn out process that kind of, it just felt like we were never going to, be able to play, never actually going to be able to qualify. And the Monaco tournament had some very competitive teams in there as well. Like, we ended up beating France in the final in Monaco to qualify, which is a really, really special memory for me. And it was a very important moment for the Sevens, which is sort of it's kind of a very nascent sport within the RFU and within Ireland, that everything that we were doing, we were kind of figuring out how to do it for the first time, because there wasn't really a roadmap of how to approach these things. So yeah, very long, very drawn out, but then also delighted to finally actually get it done.
Yeah, you didn't make it easy, but that was I mean, it was wonderful to be and have it so proximate to the two. And I think from an Olympic Games point of view, Rio was the first time that rugby sevens was in the Olympics. So
Yeah.
it's a very new sport in the Olympic Games, which is great that there's this turnover all of the time of sports that are reflecting the new sports, I suppose, that are coming in around the world. And John, you had a very different experience. I know that you were one of the crew that qualified the boat for the Olympics, arising out of your silver medal win at the 2019 Rowing World Championships. So talk us through that. That must have been, you qualify a boat and then you have to earn your seat in the boat. Am I right in saying that? Talk us through that process and how that happened.
Yeah, that's the process. They don't guarantee the same crew in the boat that qualified for the games. So you have to go through the whole selection process again, which can be pretty grueling. And at least how the US does it, it's about 6 months before the games leading up is sort of when the selection camp really kicks off. And that's just a lot of head-to-head seat racing, over and over, making sure the right decisions are made, the right people in the boat are made, and that the fastest crew is sent to the games.
Mm. And obviously the fastest crew was sent to the games. You guys picked up a wonderful silver medal, but it wasn't easy, was it? You had to deal with the whole COVID interjection and the postponing of the Olympic Games from 2020 to 2021, even though the 2020 moniker has been kept. Can you maybe just explain to us what it must have been like to be ready to go for 2020 and then for it to be postponed, and then the work that you had to do in order to keep fit and so on? Maybe just talk us through that, because I think that has to have been in the most difficult period for athletes.
Yeah, I think it was especially hard because I was in my senior year in college, of course, rowing for that team, and we were super in peak form, getting ready for our own championship season. And then, sure enough, our whole season was canceled, and sort of our senior year, our last hurrah was sort of cut short, which emotionally that was pretty difficult. And then I think not long after that, the actual games were also postponed, which was especially confusing, sort of tacking on another year to preparations, which are already sort of mentally draining. And now I have to do it a whole nother year in preparation. So I took some time to sort of collect myself, and then also with the US Paralympic team to sort of plan out a strategy, sort of when we'll train and when we'll be together again, that sort of thing. So the most of it was a lot of planning, which helped a lot, because I think during that time, no one really knew what was going on, if the games would even happen, because I know there was talks about canceling the whole thing. So it helped to at least get back to the basics, keep training, stick to what you know, and control what you can.
Mm. And it must have been wonderful then when you did get to go and become part of Team USA and mix in with other athletes and other teams. What was that like? You're used to being in a rowing crew, and now you're suddenly with a wider team of athletes from almost every sport. What was that like?
It was very, very special. Rowing as a sport, I think, is already pretty siloed and sort of on the fringes of at least American sport. And so coming together and actually being sort of integrated and feeling a part of Team USA was really, really special. And I think that really hit home during the opening ceremony, sort of when everyone's in their opening ceremony outfits, even having all the countries together, and actually feeling like one big community was, I couldn't really put into words. I'm curious to see if Jack, if you went to the opening ceremony.
Well, Jack, tell us, did you, and what was your Team Ireland moment like?
Yeah, so we were unfortunate actually that we our training schedule in the lead up to our tournament meant that we couldn't go to the opening ceremony. I think, you know, looking back, we really would have wanted to, but just it would have been a lot of walking and standing the night before our first games. So we missed out on that, but I mean, we like in Tokyo, we had a building all to ourselves as an Irish team. So even though we kind of just like, you know, hitched our wagon to the train at the last minute and sort of just showed up in Tokyo before the other teams or other athletes really even knew that we'd qualified. We then sort of took over a whole floor in the building and was quite a part of what was going on. And I think what was special for us was that, you know, for instance, and like the Irish Rowers is a great example, was actually welcoming them back into our building. And, you know, we'd go out and we'd all line up. And, you know, just it was very special to be a part of what is such a big moment for those athletes, you know. And obviously, like, just competing at all. I think everyone just instantly felt very at home with each other. And I certainly felt like it was a big honor just to be surrounded by everyone and to be a kind of a small part in all of what was some of their greatest days of their lives. And, you know, even when we finished up our tournament, we you know, that's kind of when everyone let their hair down a little bit and could really focus on actually getting to know each other rather than just focusing on, you know, the events that they had coming up. So it was those few days that we had after we finished to just get to know the other athletes and sort of where they came from and just how hard they were working to be where they are. So yeah,
we saw those videos of the rowers being clapped home. I mean, I was really lucky. I was there at the rowing and saw them win the medals. But there was very much a divide between the sporting events and then the village and where the athletes were. Do you want to just maybe touch on the bubble atmosphere because of COVID and just give a slight insight into what that was like for you as an athlete, Jack?
Yeah, it was very strange. You know, I mean, like what struck me was actually just the size of the village. I mean, the scale of it. It was, you know, it was just huge. And there were so many athletes walking around, and it was a dampener that there was a fear that COVID would interfere with the games. So that definitely had an impact on, you know, the amount of interaction that was going on around the place. And I think you have to respect, obviously, that people have been working, you know, for 4 years to get to where they are, and that, you know, that's and everyone had that focus. So there was quite an individual focus at that time to keep even your team together and, you know, not to have anything that would disrupt the process. But it was, I think, quite manageable. You know, we were obviously just delighted to be there, you know, first of all. So that, you know, put rose tinted glass on everything. And being able to just walk around and see, you know, so many different athletes that you would have, you know, watched in previous Olympics, and see, you know, just how many athletic freaks there are at going to the Olympics. I mean, you know, you'll see the biggest person you've ever seen in your life, you know, next to a gymnast who is, you know, and then next to basketball players and rowers and volleyball players. And so I was struck by just how impressive, how dedicated everyone was there. And to be fair to the organizers of the event, to be able to host something on that scale and not to have COVID interfere with it was really impressive, you know. Mm-hmm. And it meant that we did really have to be careful, you know, and we would go from our building to a bus, go from the bus to train, and then back, and that was sort of it. So you know, there were small sacrifices that had to be made in order for it to work, but, you know, looking back, it really didn't have much of an impact.
Yeah. And John, for you, when did it sink into into your mind that you were competing in the Paralympics? Was it when you went into the village, or at what point on the journey for you was it that you were very conscious of this is the moment?
I don't even know if I've registered it. It still feels like a bit like a dream that it happened. I guess to Jack's point, it was really crazy, the scale of it, and then how well run it was, and it really felt not real at all. But I think it actually probably sunk in. I think being in that village and seeing everyone from all the countries and how happy everyone was to be there and how nice everyone was. I think that really, and in particular the dining hall, probably.
Okay, tell us about the dining hall, because I didn't get to see it, and I'm sure most of our listeners haven't seen but have heard about the Olympic dining halls. So just give us a flavor for what's in there.
I think just like any, school lunchroom where everyone's incredibly chatty, talking to each other, eating amazing food. And I think, to me, I just really like that community sort of atmosphere in the building. It was 2 floors, so it was also massive.
Yeah.
And yeah, great food too. So.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you now about the silver medal. What was it like? What did it feel like to win the silver medal? And maybe you might want to take us through the race and the lead up to that. I think we'd be just really interested to hear that.
Yeah, so the lead up, so we did all our training in Boston, Massachusetts, on the Charles River, and I think that was a great plan because we knew Tokyo was going to be very hot. I think similar humidity and temperature to Boston. So we did all our training in like the middle of the day at peak heat, which I don't know if was a safety concern. Looking back, maybe not the smartest thing. So when we were actually there racing, it felt very familiar. And the race itself was sort of like a blur, happened so quickly. And we gave GB somewhat of a fight in the first half of the race, but then they were just so good. They've won, I think, 4 straight gold medals. It's pretty incredible what they've been able to do. So even to be in the same race as them and to get second to them, I will say I'm honored. But yeah, when we actually crossed the line and came back to the dock, I think it started to really sink in, putting on the podium outfits and then actually getting the medal was pretty special.
And Jack, just your experience of actually playing rugby in Tokyo. Obviously, the stadia were empty except for other athletes and sport personnel. There were no spectators, although there were billions watching, obviously, on television. What was it like competing? Was it like a 7 series? Was it just up a notch? What was it?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because it's not exactly dissimilar to what we would go through on, say, a series tournament. But I think something that we learned very quickly in the first game when we lost to South Africa is that, where we had been training and focusing so much on winning the tournament in Monaco the weeks prior, these teams had been preparing, South Africa had been preparing for 2 years for what they were going to do off the first kickoff against us. So I think we met a lot of teams that we would have played with during the year, but met them probably at their very best. If we can be very honest and say that we weren't at our very best at the Olympics. We if emotionally, I think a lot of our energy went into the Monaco tournament, and then everything happened so quickly after that we almost didn't have a second to think before we were just then straight away running back on the pitch in Tokyo. So it was weird not having any spectators. It's there were a couple of interesting aspects to it, but I think it was probably just the level of competition that struck us, that, you know, it is the biggest honor in rugby sevens to get an Olympic medal. And where we had just got on the series, we'd actually just qualified for the series the year before. So we were almost still getting used to the level of competition there. And then we met those same teams at the Olympics, just people absolutely giving everything to try and get any kind of silverware. So I think it's probably something that spurred us on now to go and qualify, hopefully earlier this time, and really push to see if we can medal this time.
Now, the Irish women's sevens team has just recently qualified for the Olympics. So has that kind of put the pressure and up the ante for the men's squad?
I'm not sure if it's put the pressure on. We would train in the same facilities as the girls, so we'd know them quite well. And I think our views towards that was just that, you know, we were so delighted for them, because obviously when, like, the last time that we went, they didn't go. And there are some really, really dedicated and impressive players that have been on that team for a long time, that have, you know, just been pushing to do what they did a couple of days ago. So I think it does definitely spur us on and inspire us. But I think the main feeling we have towards it is just actually to be very happy for the girls, and to, you know, let them enjoy celebrating now, and hopefully we can be celebrating with them in a month's time.
Yeah. And certainly Team Ireland definitely benefits from having team sports as part of that whole compendium. And I think, you know, hopefully you guys will be there as well next time out in Paris. John, I'll be interested to hear what kind of advice it is that you would give to anyone who dreams of becoming an Olympian or a Paralympian.
Yeah, if they have a specific dream to do that, I think it's, you know, requires just sort of persistence. And I think for me, what helped sort of keeping my, you know, sights on that goal was just trying to be as level as possible. I think there's so many ups and downs throughout the whole journey, however long it may be. And for me, what helped the most was keeping the highs low and the lows high, and trying to be as level as possible. I think because it's so easy to get caught in the swings throughout the journey. And I think if you just sort of stick to, you know, your core, and if you really want to aspire to that, just sort of keep going. And patience and persistence, I think, is probably the most important thing with that. And leaning on your peers and others, and not necessarily, you can never do it yourself. It takes a village. So I think using the resources you have and the people you have are probably also the most important thing.
Jack, do you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think just like being very comfortable with failure probably helps people. Like, for instance, I never thought I would be playing, you know, in the Olympics for Ireland, playing sevens. When I started out, I tried to be a rugby union player, and that didn't work out for me, you know, and that was tough. But, you know, having put so much effort into trying to pursue that, I ended up having opportunities that I wouldn't have had I never tried to pursue that, you know, for instance, playing in the Olympics. So I think, you know, just accepting that failure is every athlete goes through probably more failure than success, but, you know, we'll look back on a career and remember the incredible times that they had, you know, during those moments of success rather than those moments of failures. And that's kind of where, you know, John's talking about persistence, that it is trying to overcome as many obstacles as you can, and understanding that things don't always go the way they are, but that's no reason to stop going.
And how do you think that you're going to weave these, you know, obviously the Olympic experience was amazing, and you have the ongoing experience of the being a member of the Irish team in the 7 series. How are you weaving these into your life skills and what's going to come? Because obviously you have another career journey ahead of you in the law. How do you think you're going to marry the two and let them benefit each other?
Yeah, well, I think I'm lucky. I'm looking going into the law that I've joined a firm that are very supportive of me. I think McCann Fitzgerald so far have been very encouraging, have helped me get through Blackhall, which is, you know, a year of law school that I started back in September. And I think that there are some benefits that come from playing, you know, a high level of team sport that you can bring into, say, an office environment where you will also be dealing with the team. And you know, there is high pressure instances in both environments. There's, you know, having to deal with different personality types or anything like that you probably pick up at an earlier stage playing professional sports. And then, you know, things that I've had to learn, even going through Trinity, about time management, about, you know, I wouldn't have been a big planner before I kind of started marrying the two things together. And so that's certainly something I had to learn. And I think just, I'm not exactly sure yet. I haven't been into the office in McCann Fitzgerald, but I'm definitely excited to get in there. From any conversations I've had with them so far, I think it's going to work quite well.
Good. And Jack or John, I've seen you nodding as Jack was speaking there. So I'm going to ask you the same question. How are you going to weave these amazing life experiences and skills that you've learned into your future?
Yeah, I think for me, picking up rowing at sort of a later age, sort of around like 15 or so, 14, and doing that for so many years, and then now sort of going on to the next thing, like career-wise and life-wise. I think I'm trying to be comfortable with being bad at something again, or sort of learning something again, because you go so long trying to master this one skill that I think I sort of appreciate now, sort of being bad at something, and that's okay, and sort of finding joy in learning new things again, and sort of not being the best at what you're doing necessarily, which is perfectly fine. Not everyone is, not that I was, but sort of riding off that feeling of learning again and using sort of all the lessons I learned early on when I was learning this weird, unnatural sport, sort of taking that into sort of whatever I do now.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take that on board too. I think that's that's a good lesson. We've also got some questions that have come in, and I'm going to ask two questions. I'm going to combine them together for you, John. And the first part of it is, do you think it's getting easier for athletes with disabilities in terms of accessibility these days, or are there still pressing issues? And then the second part, which is not a related question, but it's whether or not you have any desire to coach rowing in the future.
Yeah. So first question, is it easier for people with disabilities to enter sport? I think so. The headway that's been made for the Paralympic movement, at least, and sort of I use Paralympic movement just broadly as sort of people with disabilities in sport, that the headway that's been made, at least since between the years of Rio 2016 and Tokyo, were astronomical. And even before that, it's been exponential in the sort of level of support internationally, I think Paralympic sport has had. And I can speak directly to at least American rowing, where the headway that's also been made for people with disabilities trying to get into rowing, at least since I started, has also been extraordinary. And in Tokyo, International Paralympic Committee launched what was called We the 15, which was a sort of global movement meant to shine light on the fact that 15% of the world's population lives in some form with a disability, and trying to sort of demystify this, I guess, what's the word, like specialization of people with disabilities, that not everyone with a disability will necessarily has to go to the Paralympics or be some inspiring story, that everyone lives with some form of this obstacle. And so I think now more than ever, if people want to pursue that, yes. And I think more progress is being made every day with that level of support. And the second part, do I want to coach rowing? Maybe down the line. Being in New York City, rowing is probably the most inconvenient sport you could possibly do. Given in college, we rowed like on the Hudson River, but that we had to have our own boathouse and our own boats. And so I think for leisure rowing or sort of smaller club, maybe down the line, if I move, to the suburbs or something like that. But maybe eventually. And
Jack, I'm going to ask you this question. I'm going to ask John as well. It's come in from the Q&A, but I think it's a great question, and that is, what was your favorite memory of Trinity?
Favorite memory of Trinity? That's a good one, actually. I'm not sure if I could definitely put one specific instance, but I think the coolest thing for me was playing with some of my best mates, and kind of the sort of the whole community that you had once you stepped off the pitch. Like, I just loved playing and then finishing up playing and heading in and straight away going over to the other team, having a good laugh with them, whether you won or you lost, and then sharing a drink and staying in the pav until you got kicked out. I really look forward to those games. So I'd have to say that.
What about you, John?
I would say maybe my walks in Chapel Izzard. I didn't really go to campus all that much, just because there was sort of no reason. But sometimes we did row on the Liffey through like downtown all the way out to the port. And that was a pretty cool memory, because just how sort of unique experience that was, rowing on that waterway, seeing a part of the city I'd never seen before from a completely unique point of view. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that is pretty special. So gentlemen, I just feel like we have just done part one of what should be a 2 or 3 part series, because I feel we've really only touched on the surface of your incredible journey of discovery that you've both had, and no doubt will continue to have as you progress in your careers and in life. I think those that are listening today will agree with me when I say that you really are both inspirational athletes and inspirational men. And I think that your words and your experiences will go on to inspire other athletes and other students. So thank you so much for your contribution to Trinity, to your sports, and to this webinar today. And I'm going to hand it back to Brian to wrap up. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Susan, to John and Jack. That was such an entertaining discussion, and we are grateful for you for being so generous with your time and for sharing your expertise. I'd also like to thank my colleagues in the Alumni Office for making today's webinar possible. And last but certainly not least, thanks to everyone who joined us and for asking questions. It's always fantastic to have such enthusiasm and engagement. I'm going to share my screen again. And Inspiring Ideas at Trinity will be taking a break for the summer, but we'll be back in September and look forward to bringing you a great selection of topics and speakers for our autumn episodes. Details of our autumn webinar schedule, including dates, speakers, and subjects, will be posted on the Trinity Alumni website, which is www.tcd.ie/alumni later in the summer. In the meantime, if you have any questions or comments regarding this webinar series, or any other questions you'd like to ask us here in the Alumni Office, please email us at alumni@tcd.ie. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you again in September. Until then, take care and have a lovely summer.